All right, we're gonna go ahead and get going.
And we are going to be speaking without a microphone today. So if you have difficulty hearing us, please, if you're in the back, just let us know. But if you want to move forward, there's a couple extra seats if that is going to be a challenge for you. Just because we don't want to both huddle around this little microphone up here, as cozy as that would be.
Well, thank you guys for coming out. Let's just start with some brief introductions. We've got limited time, so I'll try not to talk too fast, but again, if we go through anything that's you have questions on, don't hesitate to ask. We brought a pretty good amount of information, but again, we've done a few of these, and what we find to be the most valuable is to give a good amount of time for question and answers, because essentially you came here to get your questions answered, right? So we have areas that we think are important to discuss, but really it's important that we get to what you folks have questions about. So I'll go first. I'm Stephen Kerby. People just call me Kerby, some familiar faces in the audience. I founded the Unchurched Church, which was the first all-encompassing DMT church in the country, and we've been running that for about 7 years. We are in Des Moines, Iowa area, in that proximity, we'll just leave it that way, which, as you could imagine, is a pretty unique space to have a church. It also gives us a lot of attention in a good and bad way. So I've been working in that space for some time now. My predominant medicine is 5-MeO-DMT. Some of you folks know it as Bufo. We'll have a talk on that later today, and MDMA.
And I'm Amber Kerby. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm also a certified psychedelic assisted therapy provider. I was the first in the state of Iowa to offer ketamine-assisted psychotherapy within a private practice, so I've been doing that for the past 3 or 4 years now. And I primarily work with internal family systems, or IFS, for anyone who's familiar with that. I find the work with psychedelics and ketamine, along with IFS, which is also kind of like parts work for anyone who's aware of shadow work, inner children work. It all seems to integrate itself so nicely.
Yeah, why we find this talk is important, or at least interesting, is early on as we were working with these medicines, anybody that's been in any type of facilitation or ceremony recognizes that folks are coming in with some level of trauma. Not just the participants, but what I recognize with a lot of the facilitators as well, right? So you can see an overlap. It became very apparent to me that the skills that I brought to the table were going to be limited. And one of my concerns in the facilitation space is I see people kind of stepping outside of their skill set and taking on roles and responsibilities that I just don't think they're trained for. I'm not a therapist, right? So I do some spiritual coaching, life coaching, and I work with people in a capacity, but that's not therapy. Right? So it became very obvious to me that, again, as these folks are coming in with very, very heavy trauma, that we needed to create something to help them transition into somebody that has more capacity and education and understanding to really help with that space. And so my beautiful wife here, we created a coalition in the sense that as I would meet people and talk to people early on, it made sense that, look, I know where my boundaries are, I know what my limits are. We need to create something where we can kind of interplay with this and work together to try to get these folks the highest level of opportunity for the healing that they're coming for.
Mm-hmm. And I think, for me as a therapist, one of the things I was really drawn to is the way that we can really balance the skills that we have and the strengths that we have in a way that can really support a client in a completely different way. He definitely has more flexibility in the arena that he works with, and I have to follow a different framework. I've got ethical and licensing boards that I really need to adhere to, which can limit some of my work. So to be able to have a network and a collaboration already with underground practitioners, other shamans, other coaches, anyone who can offer a modality that is different than what I can offer is incredibly valuable.
Yeah, so we spend a good amount of time. We run the Mindscape Institute, which we started about 3.5 years ago, where we teach online courses in facilitation, and it's targeted towards facilitators and therapists. Trying to introduce therapists to what's happening in these spaces. We understand that there are some therapists that are working in the psychedelic space, again, in Iowa, that's very limited, if at all. But yet to me, it made sense that they need to have a basic understanding of what's happening in these spaces, how these medicines are impacting people, and so they could be prepared. And again, not just on the back end of it, right? And we'll talk about this in a minute too, is as I was working with people, they would mention that they had a therapist. And that's what dawned on me. I'm like, we need to create something here. Almost everybody I was talking to had a therapist. And I'm like, I need to get on the same page with them. But as I talked to other facilitators, that was something they were pretty uncomfortable with. And I didn't quite understand why. And then again, it started to be a realization that they're kind of walking outside the lines of their capacity, and they're trying to be more than what they should be. And that's not a knock on anybody. That was just an observation of, again, you're not a therapist. You need to be very cautious as you're working with these folks that have heavy levels of trauma.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I can keep going. You got to hit me. You got to stop me. So again, the complementary nature of it, again, is not just from them working with the folks, but now what we've tried to do in working together is folks come to me or even come to her, and I got to be cautious because I don't have to work under the same rules and ethical guidelines, and I can say whatever I want to say, and obviously I talk. So I can get myself in not as much trouble as she can get herself. So I want to be cautious with this, but trying to create this, again, this relationship from the time somebody starts interacting with me and I find out that they have a therapist. How do we create a bridge with those folks? How do we create some sort of communication where we can get on the same page and nobody feels that they're stepping on anybody's toes, and that we can actually create a coalition again for this person's health. And that's where, again, having your wife that's in that space is obviously fantastic. She's obviously not the therapist for all the folks that I work with. Right. I don't even refer people to her directly. That just feels uncomfortable, but they know who she is because we're in a small area. It's pretty easy to find out who she is, and because there's not a lot of folks working with psychedelics in our space. So I spend a lot of time consulting therapists, again, on what's happening in these spaces, what type of dosing is potentially happening with these folks, and really giving them some guidance and some information so as they're working with their clients or patients, that they're really a little bit more informed about what's about to happen, what that looks like, and that just gives them a tremendous amount of information to walk into a session with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that part's incredibly valuable, especially as a mental health provider in a state that's very limiting with the medicines that I can work with, being able to collaborate with anyone working with other medicines and really understand what their approach is, what the dosing looks like, what's the protocol, what's their framework, what's the language that the facilitator is going to bring in. So when I'm continuing to do this work with my client and they say, yeah, and then they have this rattle, I'm not like, okay, wait, what's happening there? Because I really do understand more of the approach that's happening. So I find that incredibly valuable to be able to have that exchange of information, to really connect in a way that's not judgmental, where two people can be very open about, this is what I'm providing, this is how I'm supporting this person, what are you providing, how are you supporting, and then how do we find the ways that intersects? How do we find the ways that it's going to make the most sense to our clients so they can really get the most out of this work?
And you brought up something perfect. Again, this uncomfortableness in the psychedelic space for therapists, right? Again, I understand we're in a different geographical area, but where we're at in the Midwest, and I'm sure this is everywhere. I mean, I work with people from all over the country. They felt very uncomfortable going to their therapist with this idea of them stepping into a psychedelic space, right? So there's a lot of resistance there, and it created this void of communication where they didn't want to tell them everything, and that didn't make me feel comfortable, right? I'm like, if you can't be honest with your therapist, we've got a problem, right? So again, it was an education of the therapist of what's happening in this space, and just trying to help them get some education around not just the ceremonial aspects or dosing protocols, but really the data as it relates to mental health and healing that's happening in this, because a lot of folks are coming with these preconceived notions of, oh, you're going to go do mushrooms with somebody, right? And that little bit of resistance, or that significant amount of resistance, again, really created this void of communication with their patients. and the participants. And so to me, again, this importance of having this dialogue with the therapist about what's going to happen, giving them some education on like, here, this is what the research is showing on this, and seeing if we could find a comfort. But ultimately, and again, if they came to a place where they just didn't feel comfortable with it, my recommendation would be, look, I know this is somebody that you've been working with for a while, but if this is a decision you're going to make and you're going to move forward with these plant medicines or these psychedelics or these entheogens, you may want to consider finding somebody that's going to support you in this, because you're going to do them. And I found that absolutely crucial, and in many cases, folks walked away from their current provider to find somebody that was at least open to the idea of them actually getting this different aspect of healing. And on top of that, what I found is, again, as I started working with the majority of the therapists in our area, a pretty good amount of therapists actually sat with me in the space, went through ceremonies together, and got their own anecdotal or personal experience with these medicines. And I found that to be absolutely life-altering, not just for them, but again, this openness now, them being able to receive people in the space, and then the amount of referrals that we were getting from therapists for this medicine. And for years, I jokingly referred to myself as the break glass in case of emergency, right? Where the therapists had tried a good portion of their modalities, they had kind of hit a dead end and said, look, let's try this additional modality and see if we'll get you some level of healing. So at least in our local area, we've really created a pretty beautiful network of therapists that, again, may not particularly facilitate medicine, but have an interest in it, have had personal experiences with it, and then are very, very open now to walking their clients down a path of utilizing these medicines.
Yeah, I mean, it really is a picture of collaboration versus competition, right? Boy, that one gets really sticky in so many industries. We're kind of looking at each other like they're competition. This is the enemy. I need to do something better. I need to do something more. So when we can really sit together at the same table and say, okay, this is who I am. This is what I'm bringing. This is what I'm really confident in. And then also I have all these questions. As a therapist, we're held to confidentiality, which is fantastic. So we can really create some good space for our clients to talk about a lot of these dynamics. But we're also held to ensuring that we're working within our scope of practice. So if we've got a client who's coming to us saying, wow, I want to engage with this medicine, and if we don't know anything about it, we do have a responsibility to our clients to do the research. And what better research than the people actually practicing with the medicine?
Yeah, and I think, again, that's a perfect point. That's the resistance I think I felt up front, was a lot of the therapists feeling like I'm supposed to be the one that's helping this person solve their problem, or I'm supposed to be the one that has the answer. So one of the things I work with facilitators on is, how do we open up this dialogue with the therapist? How can we make it non-competitive, right? And really give them the space to kind of bask in their skill set. And it could be something as simple as the approach that I've already discussed. Like, look, this is what I do. I've got limitations. I think what you have is obviously something that I can't provide, but it's extremely valuable to this person and their healing. How can we work together? And just that little intro essentially just kind of breaks that resistance of, okay, I'm in competition with this facilitator. Now, in a lot of the therapist's defense, again, a lot of the folks that I'm working with, is they do have a facilitator that, again, is, they're blurring the lines, right? So we've always come up with a system, I call it the, red light, green light, yellow light, right? So I've got a level of difficulty as far as what they're bringing to the table that I'm comfortable with, right? Because especially as we move into the integration concept, integration isn't always just integrating a traumatic experience. Sometimes it's integrating a positive experience for the benefit of them, right? So I can move into the space with those folks. I'll dabble in the yellow light, right? Some folks that I'm like, I think we could work on this together. But once it starts passing that, it's like, look, this is out of my capacity. I think you need to find, if you're not working with somebody already, but we need to bring somebody in.
And that flow goes both ways. I mean, one of the phrases that we always love is stay in your own lane. And so it's important to know what your lane is and what's going to be the most comfortable, where's your competency, and being able to reach out to people who are going to be able to fill in the gaps. Because even as a therapist, I mean, I know how to do almost everything. But there are definitely areas where clients are coming with different interests or avenues that they want to explore, that's not something that I can offer. But I love to be able to say, well, this person's really good at this person's really good at that, and really connect the dots.
Yeah, and again, that's great. And that's why, to me, it's like creating these alliances. Again, for example, she's got her skill set. Ketamine right now is what she's able to do legally. To us as a family, her protecting her license is the top priority, right? That just is the top priority. I train a lot of therapists that are more willing to take those risks and kind of step over that line and work with some of these medicines. I honor that too. That's just not where we're at as a family, right? So even as an underground practitioner, we set up a church called the Unchurched Church, which is kind of an ironic name, to kind of provide us as much legal protection as I can get in that space as well. But it's important for us, again, to stay in these lanes, understand what her licenses involve, what she's able to do, what her limitations are, and then what my limitations are. But if she doesn't meet the need of the participant, the client, the celebrant, whatever term you want to use, again, do you have this relationship with other therapists that maybe are somatic practitioners, which I find extremely valuable for integrating, especially 5-MeO experiences? You know, what other type of modality outside of what her expertise is? And again, can we do this without this? She's never looked at me and said, why aren't you sending them to me, right? That's not the case. There's plenty of people for folks to work with. And so how do you create this collaboration? So again, as I mentioned earlier, the majority of the folks that I'm meeting are through therapists now. And so we've really been able to create this network of folks outside of ourselves. And we really are able to see the benefits that these participants are gaining from that. And we always hear the term, it's about helping people heal. We want to help people heal. We want to be involved in healing. If you truly care about people's healing, you got to put your ego to the side, right? And again, I see that in the facilitation space, which I'm a pretty big advocate against, is trying to be the guru, trying to be the special person, right? And this really creates an issue in the space where they feel that they have to present themselves as all-knowing and have it all figured out and follow my lead. Let me tell you about the nature of reality. They're injecting their own spiritual beliefs on people, all the while spiritual bypassing on their own. So I'm a pretty staunch critic of some of the facilitation spaces, again, just because of this egoic need to be seen as the one with the answers. And I think that's causing as much harm as actually some of the facilitation is doing positive.
Yeah, and so I think one of the biggest things that we're advocating for as well is mutual respect. Really being able to, as a therapist, sit with my clients and hold respect for the facilitator, whether I agree with everything that they're telling me or not, but to really validate a client's experience, their perspective, what it is that they chose. And I think that goes a long way with this culture of collaboration that we're really trying to build as well, that we can kind of hold space for what's going on with each party, and maintain an open line of communication for those times where I am in contact with a facilitator and then my client reports something that raises some red flags for me, and then I think, wow, there's some safety things, there's some harm reduction. Can I still contact that facilitator and say, this is what I've heard, can you tell me more about this? And then can we talk about some safety? Can we talk about trauma-informed approach and maybe how you can use a little bit more of that in this practice? So having those open lines of communication is also what's going to build this respect between both parties, build this bridge essentially that we're really looking for.
Can you share with them how, again, the form that you utilize and how we're able to keep in some level of communication?
Yeah, when we have a shared client, so to speak, as a therapist, I have a release of information form. So any mental health practitioner, you all know what that is. You have that. So we just really dictate what and how much information the client is comfortable in us sharing, and ensure that I've got that signed form on file, so that it essentially allows me to navigate confidentiality with my client's permission.
And I think the confidentiality is vital, and I know is, well, just for me, because I have somebody that's in that therapeutic space, I take a lot of the techniques or regulations, rules, whatever you want to call it, that she uses, informed consent, understanding confidentiality I follow the same guidelines that she follows as deeply as I can, because again, I think as you're blending these two modalities, there's a lot that could be gained from the therapeutic space, especially informed consent, which I'll talk about in my 5-MeO ceremony, where people are just showing up and they're like, what am I doing today? And then they don't have the ability to consent to some of the things that are happening. And I see that to be a huge concern in the space. But I also don't expect, well, one of the things that I love about her, she won't tell me anything, and that she's not supposed to. So even if we're working with the same person, 90% of the information I get is actually from the participant. It's like, well, I talked with Amber and she said this. I'm like, that's actually really good advice. And I honor it in exchange. So I don't have a form, but I honor that same confidentiality, and I let them know that, like, look, anything that we talk about is just between us. You may not believe that because we're husband and wife, but trust me, that is absolutely what's happening in the space, because I want to honor that and respect that. And again, working with a male or female, there's going to be different things that they're more comfortable sharing with me. There's other things that they're going to be more comfortable sharing with her. And again, we absolutely have to respect that. But when this is done properly, again, what we're seeing is the results are, 5x, right? Somebody comes in, they're working with a therapist, they're interested in stepping into spaces. We could collaborate together, talk about what that looks like, talk about a potential dosing protocol, talk about what the therapeutic, timeline or sessions are going to look like in between. All of that could really be mapped out and laid out in advance, and really give these folks that are stepping in just a really beautiful roadmap for what it looks like over the next so many months. And then we can maintain that, we can collaborate, make some adjustments, and then really, again, keep these folks in the loop. And what we're finding is it's been absolutely invaluable which is, again, is a significant shift from, again, what we're seeing in the common facilitation space. Somebody shows up, has an ayahuasca ceremony, hides from their therapist because they don't want to share what they just did, and they're just missing out on a huge opportunity.
Oh, I lost my train of thought.
So it sounds like not so much psilocybin and MDMA, or you're doing psilocybin and MDMA with the clients, because the screening for 5-MeO would be different from screening them for MDMA. Right?
For sure. Yeah, I work with a little bit of 5-MeO, MDMA, psilocybin. Used to work more with ayahuasca, but really shifted to 5-MeO, psilocybin, and MDMA. And absolutely, the contraindications are different, right? The screening protocol is different. The preparation is different. So again, if I'm working with a therapist outside of my wife, I could have those conversations with them where, like, these are some of the things you might want to look for. There could be a heavy destabilization. If they use 5-MeO DMT, that's what this could look like. And really give them that type of information to prepare for what's happening.
So underground, do you find contraindications with SSRIs with 5-MeO, or does that 5-MeO just blast right through it?
I think it's dangerous to work with the SSRI. I mean, I know other five facilitators will do it, but it's again, it's working on the 5-HT1A and 2A receptors, just like some of the common psychedelics. I mean, it's got an affinity towards the 1A, but just like other common tryptamines, it's hitting those serotonin receptors. And I think it's hitting them so heavily that that's what's creating that space of ego dissolution, and where they're literally unconscious, right? They're physically out of their body because I think the serotonin just floods that system and shuts them down. So to me,
we'd want them to taper first before you give them 5-MeO.
100%, and that's again another.
It's a huge area to be able to collaborate on when you've got a client who's going to be working with a medicine where they're going to then have to start stepping down any prescriptions as well to hold a lot of that support. If anyone has had a client try to get off their SSRIs, that can be a really tricky time frame. So to be able to hold that support,
I'm a facilitator from Oregon, and we've had really good success in working with people who are on SSRIs and keeping them on the SSRIs.
Right.
So we'll start with a lower dose, maybe 3 grams, and then we can boost in an hour another 1 to 2 grams as needed.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's working really well.
Yes, that's fantastic. Yeah, not all medicines require a change. Ketamine, there's very few prescriptions that have to be adjusted. So being able to have that open line of communication with the facilitator, what are they comfortable with, what is their protocol, what's going to be most appropriate for our client, because you may bump up against other facilitators with psilocybin who say, yeah, actually I don't want them on that though, I'm not comfortable with that, that's the way I was trained. So really being able to just be in that communication and understand, like as a therapist, to be able to work with our clients around informed consent. The more I understand what's going on, the more I can really help my client understand what's going on. What are the risks? What are the benefits? Do they know exactly what they're getting into?
And I agree. I'm more comfortable using psilocybin if they're on SSRIs than 5-MeO.
Yeah.
That's the workaround, because the SSRIs fight the Molly, right? But if they're fighting the Molly, you're picking up the resistance. We start layering on a gram of psilocybin at a time until it gets around the SSRIs.
Right.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Some quick questions. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, we have one right behind you.
So as a clinic owner, one of our biggest challenges is we want our clients or patients to work with a therapist if they like their therapist.
Yeah.
Most of the time, they don't want to tell their therapist.
Right.
We don't want to withhold medicine from them, but we gently encourage. And what normally happens is that they don't really believe us that they need therapeutic integration. We do integration with our guides, but we don't provide psychotherapy.
Yeah.
And then they'll have one or two ketamine infusions, and then they're like, oh my God.
What was that?
Now I understand.
Yes.
But at that point,
Yes.
it's very difficult to find somebody to set them up with because the protocol is so short. So
Yes.
I'm intrigued with what you guys said that did you do a networking event? I mean, how did you get a group of therapists to come in? Because we have the challenge from a patient standpoint where they don't want to tell them. We also have the challenge from therapists who don't know anything about either psychedelics or ketamine, and they're almost sabotaging a little bit.
Yes.
And so we're all about educating. We want that. We want to collaborate. We always offer. We'll have as many discussions with your therapists as possible, so that they know exactly what we're doing. We're not having a lot of good success with that one-on-one.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Where are you from?
Denver.
Yeah.
So I am
That's
curious
surprising.
to know how you got a group therapist in the room, because we would love to do that. Be able to say, here's an open house. Here's our clinic.
Yeah.
This is what we do.
Yep.
Ask questions. We want to talk
Sure.
to you.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah. I almost feel like it has to be that level up, though. I mean, we have clinics in Iowa, and they've attempted open houses, but it's always felt really disconnecting as a therapist. But what I've found valuable as a therapist is that I've been doing more workshops, and I've had other clinicians come in and like really learn about it. Here's, the protocol in the clinics, here's the protocol in private practice, here's what the doses look like, here's kind of what a client is experiencing. So if it's a little bit more educational, so that therapists can come in and say, okay, what really is happening here? What are they experiencing? How can I help support them? And giving them those nuggets is, I think, going to be way more beneficial than just like, look at our space, and then we're like, cool, well now I know where my client is going, but I still don't understand what's going on here.
more of a question answer and like explanation and collaboration. We're all about collaboration.
Yeah.
There is not getting people interested
Yes.
in it.
Have
They
have
don't
you?
really want to know. It's weird.
That is very interesting.
Yes.
Well, and again, knowing that 5-MeO is a completely different animal, so to speak. But for me, once they've been in the space, they get it, right? Once they've been in the space and had the experience themselves, they get it. So it was easy. I mean, I literally was just, again, if somebody came to me and said they had a therapist, I would contact the therapist and see if we can collaborate. Just say, look, here's where I'm at. Here's my limitations. Here's where you're really going to be extremely impactful. Also, if you're interested, just to see what's happening. And something I've said to therapists that maybe it's true, maybe it's not. I'm like, if you're not understanding what's happening in the psychedelic space in the next 5 years, you're going to be like my grandfather that doesn't want to use the World Wide Web, right? It is changing this space. And so you could only hide from it for so long. And if you really want to, create a better space and have more opportunities to meet folks, you at least need to understand what's happening in these spaces, how these things are helping and impacting people. And I've got almost no pushback. And then from the client standpoint, it's pretty simple. Like if you're working with a therapist, you need to be able to have open and honest communication with them, or it kind of defeats the purpose. So how can we create a line of communication? And if you're not comfortable with that line of communication, let's attempt it. And if not, I would recommend at least talking to some other folks and seeing if you could find somebody where you could feel whole in those conversations.
So just real quick, we have a service center in Oregon where we offer experientials for therapists.
Yes.
Yes.
So 4 or 5 therapists come in,
Yep.
and there's a day-long session. The first 4 hours is education, then there's 4 to 6 hours of dosing, right? So we just do a bunch of therapists at once.
Yes.
Just invite them
Yeah.
over.
Yeah.
And you'll get amazing referrals then, because you'll have therapists who really understand the medicine and say, oh, this is going to be so appropriate for this client. Yeah.
Yeah. I saw you
Yeah,
in the back first.
I'm curious about your opinion on just, I love that you have both sides of this together. What is your opinion on the ideal legal and regulatory status that supports a client who's seeking healing, an underground practitioner that's not a therapist and a licensed and trained therapist?
Hmm.
That's a whole other talk, isn't that? Wow. Yeah. What is the ideal regulation for healing?
Because
Mhm.
one is a licensed therapist.
Yes.
Catherine is because I'm an RN.
Yeah.
I'm not a therapist,
Mhm.
but this is the space that I work in.
Yes.
And so how do we have enough working in this space ethically and legally?
Yes.
Right.
And then providing healing for as many people as we can,
Yeah.
staying safe. What's your opinion on that ideal?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have the answer to it. I mean, again, because my focus is, and again, not to pitch our institute, but again, it's this education, right? To me, we don't need more facilitators. We need more good trauma-informed, well-educated, less egoic facilitators in the space, because the underground space is, if anything, it's growing, right? Until they figure out how to legalize some of these substances and stop putting therapists' license at risks, there's always going to be this massive underground. So to me, it's like I can't change the FDA and where they're at on MDMA. I can't do that. But I can train facilitators to understand these therapeutic modalities, and that's what we do together. Our classes are, she's bringing the therapeutic lens, I'm bringing my lens. How do we blend the best of these two? And then how do we create a community around it, right? So you have a community of peers, people that are kind of keeping an eye on you, and vice versa. So for right now, where it is legally, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Again, Iowa, I don't even think cannabis is legal yet there, right?
Medical.
Yeah, medical, but it has to be like a vape cartridge. You can't even
Yeah,
get.
yeah.
So we're the dinosaurs
Yeah.
on legalization. So to me, it's just apparent that at least for the next 3 to 5 years,
Yeah.
the underground practitioner is going to be the predominant force in this space,
Yeah.
and that kind of concerns me
Right.
on some level. But also, there's some benefit to it. That's not a knock on all facilitators. Obviously, it's a little bit of the wild west out there. I think we all
Yeah.
can kind of agree on that. You've got your good, your bad, the ugly. And then how do you train therapists, again, to at least understand what's happening in this space, embrace what's happening in this space, and therefore try to find these collaborations?
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the very least, which is not a small thing, we just really have to focus on harm reduction and safety, and really this crazy idea of collaboration. Because the more in touch we are with each other, the more connected we are with each other, I think the less sideways it's going to go, because we're going to have those internal checks and balances anyway. So I think building those relationships, really focusing on harm reduction and equipping society to do what society is going to do, but how do we wrap this with enough safety as we can, so that we do have access to these healing medicines.
Yeah, and that collaboration, I'll just be super brief and answer the next question. It's keeping the facilitators in a perfect space too. It's almost like they've got they've got an eye. They've got somebody that they're working with, so they don't get too wonky.
Checks and balances.
Yeah, there's some
is
checks
what it
and
feels like.
balances
On both sides.
on both sides of it. So they're more likely to stay in their lane. They're less likely to start taking on participants with heavy trauma and try to resolve that for them. Stop over spiritualizing, and they've got that blend. So again, I think the more groups that we can have collaborate, just the better the space is going to be until there's more legalization around it.
How are you addressing people who can't afford therapy? There's a large population out there. Are you doing anything along those lines?
Personally, I offer a sliding scale, so I can help reduce some of the obstacles. And in our network, we do have other practitioners, we have other coaches and therapists who can be flexible with some of that pricing. But I agree, that one's going to be really tricky, especially, you know, given some of the price tags that we're seeing in states where you are legally able to operate, and then how you need to manage that. So I think we're aware of it and managing it the best that we can, but it's tricky.
And I actually went back to school. I'm in the middle of my master's program to get my license in therapy, whether I'll get my full licensure or not, for that reason. It's like, how can I provide what I provide? I'm essentially retired. So how can I provide that level of skill set in that space at reduced cost for people that just need it? But that is one of my concerns about the medical model moving forward. Again, we could talk about MDMA and so, like, how do you have two therapists in a room for 6 to 8 hours, right? So it's going to be an obstacle.
Yeah.
This gentleman then.
So I'm LMFT from South Dakota.
Yeah.
So, but part of my question is, how do you navigate that when you have a client that you go like, you know, this could be, I guess, really reactive managers, and this could be helpful, but can't really make that referral, or is it you start just with ketamine? Like, I'm curious, how do you manage that?
Yeah. So how do I manage? Can you ask me just one more time?
So you see a client that would probably benefit from a psychedelic experience with your licensing, trying to protect your license, and saying, oh, hey, I think you should go outside of therapy and find.
We get to have a lot of fun general conversations, right? Where you're like, I wonder if there are some other things that we could look at. Please do your research. You know, there's breath work and psychedelics and, you know, Reiki. So we can, you know, kind of generally direct clients to some alternative healing practices, which I think, you know, fits within my scope of practice. And, you know, I don't really push the ketamine on anyone within my my clientele if they don't want it, if they're not ready for it. But they know it's an option. So there are quite a few people who are interested in working with the non-ordinary states. And given the Midwest, which you're so aware of, the idea of, you know, seeking one of those bigger experiences can be a little intimidating versus a smaller experience with ketamine in my office can feel a little bit more accessible to people.
And I find that for some folks, again, and I know they've shown us 3 signs like, stop talking. This will be the last thing. Then we'll answer questions. Well, we can meet folks out in the hallway. Yes. But again, for a lot of folks that, again, prior to stepping into some of these larger experiences, you know, I do say, consider this, right? There's the legal aspect of it. So I work with a lot of professionals, a lot of public folks that maybe don't want to step into the underground. We all have our likes and dislikes for ketamine, as we do all of the psychedelics and entheogens. But I do find it for a lot of folks like, hey, here's a scaffolding. You know, let's build a scaffolding before we start moving up to something more powerful. But let's consider the legal route first. So I, even as a facilitator, I believe in that level of titration, right? Let's start with some easier to manage entheogens, psychedelics, and then let's see where that leads.
Or even non-ordinary states that they can find in meditation and breath work and sound bath. Like, go ahead and, you know, dip your toe in the water here before you just jump in with some 5-MeO and ego dissolution and mystical experiences. But part of our, you know, our informed consent too, to be able to kind of support clients in slowing down enough to really ensure that they're making decisions that they believe are right for them, and that aren't, you know, setting off all the lights for us, thinking like, oh man, I got to document this, and how's this going to go down? And if I have any concerns, I have a ethical reason to say it. Yeah.
I think we need to wrap up, but we can step out in the hallway and.
Psychedelic integration is legal.
Yes.
Psychedelic integration is legal. You can legally offer psychedelic integration.
Yes. Yeah. We should chat.
Thank you guys very much. Appreciate this. If you're around at 2:15, I'll be talking about 5-MeO DMT. I'm actually excited about that one.